This interview is with one of the astronauts that was killed in the Challenger tragedy in January of 1987. I will not speak the name of the person that I'm conversing with, but pretty much anybody can put the puzzle pieces together. This interview that I did with her was a year after the Challenger accident. But it's just as vital and interesting today as it was back then. So sit back and enjoy. I'm so pleased that she is in a state of being healed and has enough self-realization to be here with me in spirit. Her eyes and hair are ginger red brown, and she exudes a lot of energy. She's showing me a representation of herself before her accident. She likes to keep herself with the body, enthusiasm, and the sensitivities that she had in life. This is how she achieved healing. It was to put herself mentally in the time before the accident. I tell her I am not interviewing you as much as just talking to you. I ask her about the memorial services for the Challenger tragedy, which were being held this morning. She says, yes, that was very interesting. And the different feelings that came to me after so much happy love and support for what I did. Then, as soon as I died, the outpouring of grief just washed over me like waves. She said, I wanted to help everybody feel better about it. I was unhappy that everybody felt so bad about me. It was my singular act of dying, and how could that erase such amazing accomplishments? These waves of sadness, of distress, really colored my environment and made it difficult for me to process my death for myself in a way, because I wanted to comfort everybody that I still existed. I was still me, and I was battled back from reaching my family by all these incredible waves of grief and sorrow and horror, all the emotions that were sent to me, and I felt them and perceived them in a tangible way. These rolling black-brown waves of sadness were very difficult for me to deal with. I had been the recipient of such good energy before, and then was just dismayed and alarmed by the heavy emotions sent to me, particularly for my own family, and of course, for the people who I had taught, who I had shared so much of my joy and anticipation with. And I just wanted to touch them and tell them it was all right. I'm still here. I'm still me, but I couldn't get through. And of course, I can't get through now, except perhaps through you, if you are believed. I say that must have been very difficult. You know, it's funny, I see your face and hair, but I have no concept of what you're wearing. And she said, well, I can change that. I have tended to keep the NASA jumpsuit on. I really liked it as a garment, and I think I looked kind of cute in it. And that's what I wear most of the time out here, because just getting to the aircraft for me was a triumph. You see, after it crashed, people no longer related to the anticipation process how I actually got to go from primarily a housewife who taught to a national figure who was in the media and in the press. And I got to meet so many wonderful, brilliant people and all the wonderful events that led up to us walking from the hatchway on to the rocket ship. I suppose that first experience would have been forgotten had the mission been successful, because there would have been so many other things that I had planned to do, both during the flight and after the flight. Perhaps that personal triumph of mine would have been forgotten. However, that was the point of triumph for me. Being chosen and working through all that training and walking onto that ship, and the actual liftoff was a triumph for me. And nobody is relating to that anymore as my triumph, but it was. I mean, people can't even think about this anymore because the emotions just overwhelm them because the mission was not complete. They consider the mission a failure, but it was not entirely a failure at all. The moment when I stepped out and waved to everybody and then stepped into the rocket, that was my moment of triumph. I have been able to hold on to that reality, and others should too. And perhaps you can write about this. Undoubtedly, people won't believe that I have actually spoken to you. Perhaps you can write a tribute to me in terms of that triumph. Find that reporter. He would understand this. He could help you do this. That's what I'd like for my children, both for my own children and the children I taught. This is what I'd like them to remember. It is the excitement of being chosen and the excitement of all that learning that led up to the liftoff. That is what I would like them to remember about me and what I did. And right then I had to cry a little bit myself because of the beauty and the positive and the uplifting and the giving thought that this is. She says, I've had a lot of time to think about this, about what happened and where I am now, what I'm able to do and what I am not. I am ready to move on from the accident, but I just think I needed to talk to somebody one more time from here. I said, well, I have to be very direct. I don't want to read your mind. Although we are conversing mentally, please just don't open your mind with all the thoughts and experiences. Don't let your mind wander because I can't read that. Try to stay focused. Try to stay with me. Try to communicate exactly what it is you want to communicate. Either for me, if there is anything I can help with, or any of the other members of the space mission. I have questions of my own that you may not be aware of yet in your process, but please try to concentrate, do not drift, so I can accurately proceed. She indicates I should ask questions. And I say, I know this is very personal, and you might think I'm being curious out of a sensationalistic point of view, but I have been involved in the study of death for many years, and everyone's subjective death experience is different. There is usually something to be learned in terms of fearlessness from each experience. I asked how much fear was with you there in the capsule. She said there was nervousness, apprehension. I wouldn't say fear. We could not see the fuel leak, so we did not know about that. We died by suffocation because of the explosion. The G-force was too great for us to breathe. The capsule was being propelled faster than we could breathe, and so the breath was knocked out of us. We just couldn't breathe, and that's how we died. We couldn't react because we didn't have the ability to move or say anything. There was fear and panic internally for all of us. There certainly was for me. For a split second, I thought it might be okay. In that first instant when the thrust first began, and then we could see the blaze of light, we knew it was the end. It takes some seconds to die of suffocation, so that it did take a little time for us to die. But we were certainly all dead before the capsule impacted on the water. The capsule itself suffered extensive burning in the explosion before it hit the water. That we were all burned, but we were already dead by then. I say, what was your immediate experience? She said, well, those trained astronauts, the ones most highly trained, did stay with the wreckage and stayed with it while they, she means NASA, searched for it. And as they brought the pieces onto the ship and took them back to Texas, the professional astronauts, except for brief sojourns to ceremonies and families' hometowns, stayed with the wreckage in the process because of being so dedicated to the mission, to science, to the use of themselves and their lives for the space program. In that way, they were dedicated. They had to completely fulfill their mission. So they continued in an out-of-body state to stay with the machinery and their associates at NASA and the processes these associates had to go through. While I came out of the water and went to my family immediately, of course, I did not feel compelled to stay with the machinery. She shows herself coming out of the water shortly after it hit, before it sank to the bottom, because the trained ones stayed with it. But she turned back from that as soon as she realized she was out of her body and her body wasn't there any longer. She came back to her family. She says, I did not lose subjective reality during the explosion and crash to the Earth. I did try to keep up with it and stay with the capsule until it hit the water, and that's where I parted ways, so to speak, with her physical body. And of course, it was her parents and her family that she was drawn back to. I say, so you knew you were out of your body. You knew you were dead because you could remember what had happened to your body. She says she was actually kept away from her family from watching the events on television because of the tremendous waves of sadness that washed over her. She was held away somewhat from that. She said there was a tremendous sense of ambivalence, that people were not even really sure what they felt. They were so horrified by the event, they couldn't accurately feel specific emotions at that point. There was just so much horror and so much denial going on at the time. They all were there, however, at the ceremony when the president and the jets flew over. I asked her, do you feel any bitterness toward Reagan about the political advantage of the launch at that particular day? She said she was not privy to that decision-making process that decided to launch. She had a feeling it had to do with the State of the Union address, but she says, you know, you can't expend energy on this level for that type of thing. It would be a waste of my energy to feel resentment or anger or anything negative there, because I couldn't expend energy on that. It probably wasn't Reagan who made that decision anyway. It was somebody in his organization who pushed for that, and they're the ones who have to live with that, with their guilt. And guilt for the nation in terms of setting back our space technology was tremendous. It was such a blow. It was not just the loss of life. It was the loss of morale in the whole space program. The death of the early astronauts could not have accomplished that kind of setback. So somebody is living with that now. But she said, as a decision, it was spread so widely, the responsibility for that was also spread among many people. And I have to interject here for those of you who don't know it. The O-ring failed. There was a gasket that failed. And it was an incredibly cold day, and NASA did not want to launch that day, but they were instructed to launch that day. Now, so many of us saw this live. It was something none of us who actually saw it happen on television will ever forget. I said, you haven't said anything about your family feelings, which I find interesting. And she said, well, I am meeting you for the first time. I really don't know you. And I was a highly private person as far as my family was concerned anyway. That was not to be talked about in public. My husband is a very private person. And even though I was a national figure, I've always respected his privacy. He and my children were not as involved as they could have been in my training and the publicity had they wished to. Had my family wished to, they could have been on TV. But I appeared on the news conferences and the press conferences by myself, by their choice not to expose themselves nationally like that. And I still respect their need not to be exposed to the public. I would have to consider you public because I've never met you before. To me, you're like a reporter or a journalist. You're just working on a different channel. I don't want you taking any messages to them because they don't believe in this kind of thing. They don't believe this is possible, and this would really upset them. The only thing I really want you to do about this is what we've already discussed. I have to say, I really respect you on that. I say you were on this side of the Earth portal tunnel. I sense you are a little fearful to cross that. She says, I think I'll be afraid of fast movement as long as I exist. And I say, certainly you've done something very profound for the species. I say, do you have any sense that this could be your last lifetime in terms of now being out of the cycle of incarnation? Have you thought of the overall picture of your life plan? And now there's something about her curling up in a chair as if she is reading, and the comfort derived from her in that particular chair. I stopped the recording while I explained some of the levels and possibilities for her now. I asked her if she is aware of, in terms of a helper or any guides. And she says, of course, we're all aware of each other, the 7 of us. I think she means the fellow astronauts there. We sense each other's process quite a bit. We are able to share experience with each other, and this has been a great help. I do sense a less tangible, not even in physical form, type helper or guide, but I haven't connected up with any of them yet because they scare me. They're nothing that I have ever been involved with before, so I guess I wouldn't know how to judge somebody with a good influence as opposed to somebody with a bad influence. So I suggest that she throw some white light of God's love at them, as I am doing to you now. And if they sparkle, then theirs is the work of God and devoted to God, and you have nothing to fear from hearing their advice. She says she's really had the sense of people who look like prophets moving around her. And I say, in order for them to be energized for you to see them, they probably are good preachers. This may be your life guide, what we call your counseling angel, a helper from your life determinant level, or your personal angels. So in that sense, they could really help you in directing your life plan. We do have this kind of help available to us, and this may be who you're seeing. She's saying this has been really wonderful. She has really been wanting to get through to somebody. And at first I thought you had been through the tunnel, but now I can see you haven't, the tunnel being the Earth portal transition. Your animation is also of an emotional nature. She says her body feels as real to her as mine would to me. I say, it's amazing, isn't it? She does take walks on the beach. She will go to lovely locations here and sense and feel the nicer parts of nature. She does treat herself to lovely places on the planet. She says, I think I will really take my time going on, no matter where it is that I'm going. It makes a lot of sense to me to move very slowly and to not rush into anything. You know, I don't have the spiritual depth that you do at all. I was used to dealing with things in black and white, what was right in front of me, what was in the physical. So it's kind of hard for me to see things your way. Those kind of questions you normally ask. I just don't think in those terms. I'm dealing with what is right in front of me still, and my own feeling for what is possible to do. And I say, well, you figured out you can make choices? She says, yes. I come and go as I please. I realize how to move around. She does spend a lot of time at her home. My family is also used to only seeing what is in front of them. She says sometimes in dream state, they really get a feeling they're with me, but there just isn't the depth there for them to even allow that this kind of communication would be possible. It wouldn't have been if I had been in a body. I would have never believed you, that you could have talked to me, even though you're talking to me now. I wouldn't have believed that possible in my life. Not that we were narrow-minded, we would have called ourselves realists. My parents are particularly realists too. Although now that they're older, some of these doors are opening. She says, now I have time to look at some of the things I never had time to do, like the birds at the bird feeder. I really take time now to more see. I ask, what is it like for you to see? When you think you're looking at a sunset, what do you feel? She says, well, I can see it that way, but I can also see it without light. My operating vision now, of course, is not dependent on light. But if I will myself to see the way I did with my eyes, I still can perceive sunset colors. Seeing a sunset is more knowing what the sunset looks like than actually looking at it. I know that's hard to explain. The information comes into my mind in a different way. The information comes in through your eyes, through your optic nerve to your brain, and thereby activates the chemical reactions that tell you what you're looking at. I will get the same impression, the same information about what I'm focused toward, but it will come into my mind instead of in my eyes. And the mental perception of it is as accurate as seeing it with your eyes. But the information comes in a different way now, of course. It affects you a lot less than seeing does because you don't have a vehicle to take care of. So it doesn't matter about the accuracy because you're not worried about tripping over something or falling off something. It's just the strangest thing to walk through buildings, just to walk through doors, because she does tend to stay on the ground most of the time. It still amazes me how I can walk through desks, people, buildings like it was air. She doesn't even have a change in perception in her energy level when she's walking through a door. She says it's a lot like being Superwoman. When her husband is frying bacon, she can remember what the bacon smells like and can experience it through memory, even if it burns or if it just begins to cook. So it does feel like there's sensory input into my body. It's just that I know I don't have eyes, so I know I'm not seeing it. And I say, well, you look like you have eyes to me, but the input is coming in or through my mind and not through my senses. The one thing she says I don't seem to have now is the sense of touch, because when I put what I think of as my hand in snow or through fire, I don't really feel anything. It's hard for me to convince myself that this is hot or this is cold. That one doesn't seem to make much sense to me because as I see myself doing something, I don't have the same reaction that the nerves in my skin would have to that kind of experience. So with all the senses, touch is the least of these. I hear you because of the vibrations your voice makes. I don't hear you because I don't have eardrums, but the resonance of what you're doing moves the air molecules. I can sense that. I can hear you very clearly. I can enjoy music or concerts. In fact, I seek music out in all the senses. The one that remains and seems the most like the one I had in a body is the sense of hearing. I imagine that's how I'm sensing it because I have no eardrums. She puts her hands over her ears and says, no, I'm definitely sensing it. I can hear you clearly with my hands over my ears. The sound is picked up all over my body. It's probably more how a deaf person picks up vibrations from the floor or through the air. It's like I can feel sound in the air. So music becomes very, very enjoyable in this way. She did particularly love music, even in her body. She loved live music, she says, and that's something she can still enjoy, and she's grateful for that. She says, I can taste that tea with you. I can just superimpose my senses over yours when you sip that tea. And she can read my sensory experience with her remembered sensory capacity. So she can experience taste somewhat by being near someone who is tasting something more directly than even smelling it, because she can't smell it. I say, so you must hang around a pizza place or an ice cream place and get a lot of enjoyment. She says, no, she wouldn't really pick up on the taste sensations of other people because she would also pick up other vibrations that she wouldn't want. So she would do that primarily with her family. I ask, so what is it that you want to do at that point? She says, I'm still resting. She primarily wants to rest. She said she probably would have been resting at this point after the Challenger. I was very energetic, but probably I would have had to take about a year off just to bake cookies and stir oatmeal after that. I don't think I could have sustained that level of energy for a very long period of time. Is there any of the others who could benefit from a visit from me, who needs to be led from point A to point B? I asked, who is floundering, who is unenergized? I feel the answer is no to that. And I thank her for her sharing her time with me and wish her well on all her journeys.